You're listening to Men of Abundance, episode 160 with Chris Marr. And today we're talking about the importance of being creative and creating content.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What's up, Men of Abundance? I am Wally Carmichael, your host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community. Today we are talking to Chris Marr, and I have to give a shout out to Mark Asquith for making this introduction. I bring it up in the conversation as well, but I just want to make sure I share this with you right here, right up front, that Mark Asquith has played a huge part, a major part in Men of Abundance, because it is his platform that he has co-founded with John Lee Dumas. Podcast websites is where I host my podcast and my website and everything to do with Men of Abundance. And I just cannot say enough about the team over there at podcast websites. If you are at all considering starting your own podcast, I absolutely, it's a requirement. If any of you ever ask me to mentor you and to coach you and to help you in building a website, the very first thing I'm going to tell you to do is to go get an account at podcast websites. Quite frankly, because I want you to do it professional. I don't want you to mess around with it. Why do anything and do it half-ass? You want to do it right, and you want to get all the bells and whistles. And oh, by the way, you might not want to build everything yourself. That's where podcast websites come in. They have built everything for you. It is plug and play. You can go over there and build the stuff yourself and try to figure out WordPress and all that other kind of cool stuff. But if you're the type of guy like me and you just want to throw a little bit of money at it and let somebody else build it so that you can maintain it, or if you want them to do the whole bit, it's all there for you from start to finish, top to bottom. So Mark and everybody over there at podcast websites, thank you very much for that. And thank you for introducing me to Chris Marr. Now, guys, this conversation may seem a little bit out of norm, but there's a specific reason why I wanted to have this conversation, and it pretty much went exactly where I expected it to go. And that is being creative and creating content. Now, as usual, I'm going to share my thoughts at the end of the conversation, but just know this. Just about every single very successful figure in history and in current times that I have personally read about has created some sort of content in their life or throughout their life in the form of a journal or any of the other mediums that me and Chris talk about in our conversation. So this conversation is very relevant to you and you're living a life of abundance. Well, it is in my opinion anyway, and therefore I believe you should pay attention to this conversation. What's more is I know other guys out there, other men and women are going to want to hear this conversation. So make sure you are abundant in your actions today by paying it forward and sharing Men of Abundance with everyone that you come in contact with, or at least the ones you care about. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to Men of Abundance on your favorite podcast player. That way you don't miss one single episode. All right, let me bring out our featured guest today. Our featured guest today is Chris Marr. He is the founder and director of Content Marketing Academy, Ltd. Chris is a teacher and a student of content marketing. He's the founder and driving force behind the Content Marketing Academy, and he's the dad to Spencer. Men of Abundance, it is my honor to introduce you to Chris Marr. Chris, welcome to Men of Abundance, man. How you doing?
I am good. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to getting stuck in today.
Man, I'm telling you what, a mutual friend connected us. I know he's connecting you with a lot of people, trying to get people to lift you up and find out what you got going on. But we got to give a shout out to Mark Asquith out there in the UK, and I can't say enough about that guy, man.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Like you said, he's helping both of us out, very, very much so.
Indeed. Where are you at in the world?
I am in Scotland, on the east coast of Scotland, sort of like midway. So right now it is grey and wet and dark and it's raining. This is like typical Scottish weather just now, So yeah, east coast of Fife in Scotland.
Wow. Keep wanting to look at my my lineage and do one of those DNA tests to see where my ancestors are from, because being my last name Carmichael, I've been told I might have some folks from Scotland. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I think everyone's related to someone in Scotland, aren't they?
Must be, absolutely.
Everyone loves Scotland. Scotland's a great place. I mean, we have people from all over come to Scotland, for even at a professional level. They love it out here. They absolutely love it.
Yeah, wonderful. So I like to start the show out, Chris, the way I start out every single morning, just like I did this morning, and that is with an attitude of gratitude. What do you have to be grateful for today, man?
Yeah, I love this question. I used to practice this a lot more than I do now, for some reason, and it was quite nice to have this question because it's reminded me of just this practice that I used to do every morning as well, about being grateful for something. And I think today, especially, I had you have good days and bad days, right? I think we're going to talk about this a little bit. But you're running your business, you always have these obstacles in your way sometimes. So even just today, I am grateful for being able to do my work, right? That was one thing I thought to myself, is just being grateful to have the access to the equipment and the place to do my work, have a conversation with you on the other side of the world, and be able to stand up on my own 2 feet and have my health and my son and my family, and just be alive in this time, right? I've been reading a lot recently, we'll talk about this later, I guess, about artificial intelligence and the future and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's just a magical time to be alive. So big sweeping gratitude statements today for me. But yeah, just being alive and having my health is like, just for some reason today, it feels good.
Yeah, it's a lot to be grateful for. Absolutely. And, I'm looking at you here, guys, it's rare, but I like to look at the guys that I'm talking to, and I don't always have that opportunity. And Chris has his video on, and he's standing there in his studio, got a great mic, and just standing tall, looking good, and healthy, looking very healthy, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we got started here, I talked a little bit about what you do professionally, and I really dig it. We're going to get into that for sure, because I love content marketing. Obviously, I'm a podcaster, blogger, vlogger, you name it. I'm doing it all too, man. I'm putting it all out there. I'm not so sure I'm doing it exactly right, but hey, I'm putting it out there, and I've been doing it for a year, and I'm willing to. I love to get on the line and talk with guys like you to learn more, because I know I have so much more to learn, and I've watched a couple of your videos, and you're the same way. We're perpetual learners. We just number one, we realize we don't know it all. We know a lot, but we don't know it all. But what we like to do here on Men of Abundance is get to know the man behind the abundance, really get personal. So if you could, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Let's get a little bit deeper and talk about kind of what got you up to this point. We're going to get into that kick in the gut moment in a minute. But what kind of led you up to what you're doing now? Who is Chris?
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot to it. I'll try and pick out some of the key kind of milestones or the key moments, and they got me here. The business that I run just now, CMA, the Content Marketing Academy, we just turned 4 years old, right? So I've been kind of in content marketing space since about 2009, 2010, when I started my first blog. And it was about that time, when Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff started to kind of come into its own. That was when I really started to get interested in marketing, but I didn't work for myself. I've only worked for myself or had my own business for 4 years. Before that, I actually worked for another organization, and it was in that role that I actually started to really experiment with stuff like social media and content. Started my first blog when I was still working, and I was kind of doing a little bit of side hustle, helping small businesses out in my spare time with their marketing. And I just got more interested in it than anything else, and more interested in that than most other people as well. So it gave me a kind of some value that I could add to the marketplace. So I just started advising people on social media stuff and marketing and content. And then that kind of turned into my business. And, I went from working full time in another organization and working part time in, doing some sort of business advice consultancy stuff. And I also started a part-time business degree as well at the same time. And it was in 2011 where I walked into my office in my job, the organization I was working for, and they were doing a bit of restructuring. They had the consultants in, and it wasn't a very nice time to be in that organization. And I walked into my office and looked at the new org chart, the new organizational chart, And unfortunately, my job role wasn't actually on the chart. So I'm looking at the chart in the office. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. My job isn't actually here anymore. So, to cut a long story short, I signed some paperwork, took some money, left that organization and went to university full time because it was the only thing I could really think about doing at the time. So I had some money to survive on and became a full-time student for a couple of years. And it was at that moment when I left my job that I realized I didn't really want to go and work for anyone else ever again. I felt quite strongly about that, but I didn't realize that until I left. Even though I was doing all this marketing advice in my spare time, it wasn't until I left the job that I realized actually I don't want to go back and work for someone else. So I found myself to be at university for all the wrong reasons. I was there to advance my career, get the degree, go and work for a larger organization somewhere else, but that didn't make any sense anymore. But I got through the degree, I passed with good merit, and I felt myself getting pulled back into it though, because all my student friends were applying for jobs, and I felt myself getting dragged back into this. And I did find myself having a conversation with the director of a company to go work for them. But after a conversation with him, it was quite a sort of emotional time actually. It was like the day that we were getting our fourth year class picture taken just before graduation, just before we finished up at university. And I had this conversation with him and I said, look, I could imagine coming into your office tomorrow and you even offering me the job and me turning it down. And I think, to be fair to both of us, I think it'd waste both of our time. I think I should just not bother with it. I'm just going to go and do my own thing. And the director was like, I completely understand. He's been there before. And he just said, look, whatever you do, just go and be awesome at it. And it was that moment, the switch, where I went from not sure what I was going to do. I had like two paths. I could go get a job or I could go and work for myself and start my own business, where I kind of like burnt my bridges and decided, I made a decision in my head that I was going to go and build my own thing. And even just quite recently, actually, so like 3 or 4 years on, my mum said to me, after all the ups and downs that we've had along the way, she just said she never really appreciated until now just how much resilience and determination and risk I'm willing to take to not go back and work for someone else. So that's been my journey so far. And it was that moment in time where I just decided for myself, I made that decision, took responsibility for that decision myself, that I was going to go and do my own thing, and getting a job was not an option. And it's almost like having a plan B for me would be like, oh, well, this isn't working, I'll just go get a job. Whereas for me now, it's actually, I will make this work because I am not going to go and get a job, if that makes any sense.
It does make a lot of sense to me. Some guys, it may not make sense. I don't know what it is about so many people that feel that it's just so important to get a job. It's not a job that you need. It's the income that you really need. And you only need the amount of income that you need, that you want to live a particular lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And that's really all you need. Anything after that, is bonus. But what's ultimately more important to me, and what I try to get my boys to understand, is what's your lifestyle like? What are you doing to earn a living? When we're talking about earning a living, is it something that fulfills you? And if it's not, why are you doing that? Why do that? So what did that do for you when you made that realization and that decision to go out on your own? What did that do for you mentally? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, it gave me the focus that I needed. I needed to have a focus, and I also needed to have. It's almost like I needed to make that decision for myself. If I had that backup plan, I maybe wouldn't put everything into what I'm doing, or have been through the tougher times, and maybe I would have given up. So I think it's given me the determination that I needed to succeed and to get better as well. Like, so every obstacle I've had along the way, dealing with obstacles, all the time, is the determination to overcome those obstacles, and knowing that if I do, I'll be better because of it. So I've become stronger, better business person, or whatever, better marketer. And I think it's made me better at all of this, because I've been determined and just never given myself the choice to stop or to give up or to take a different path. I wanted to invest myself, and it would have been even if I did take a job, even back when I was working for someone else for 10 years, I put everything into that. I would do the extra hours. I wasn't the type of person that was clocking in at 9 o'clock and clocking out at 5. I was doing 60, 70 hours a week. It's I've got the work ethic there. I think for me, it's about putting it into something that I truly believe in and that I have as much control over as I possibly can as well. So I think there's a lot in there. But I think the main thing is that it's done for me is I've taken full responsibility for this. That's the key, I think. And because of that, I'm willing to go through a lot to get to where I want to get to. And as part of that, it's about, like we've already mentioned, learning, development, and overcoming the hard times as well.
Yeah, and overcoming those hard times and those challenges are truly what makes men the abundant leaders that they are, because you cannot grow without that challenge. You simply can't. If you're just sitting on the couch watching the game, going to work, like you said, 9 to 5, coming home, sitting on the couch, doing that day in and day out, you're not growing. Even if you're progressing at work a little bit, you're still not growing as a man. You're not growing as a person. You're not growing as a husband, father, so on and so forth. So speaking of that, those kick in the gut moments, when we're talking about those challenges, and in those challenges, sometimes those challenges take you to your knees. It feels like a kick in the gut, just knocks the wind out of you. And I'm sure you've got one or two that you can mention, if not several. I'd love for you to mention one of those, share one of those kick in the gut moments with us and really make us feel that.
Yeah, so I've mentioned maybe one about the decision. That was a frightening moment, just deciding to not do something, to say no to something, turn down an opportunity to take on your own wasn't a kick in the gut. It was probably more like uncertainty was probably one thing, just a little bit of fear, a lot of fear associated with that, but a lot of emotional relief with it too. So that's one out of the way. The other one is more personal and tied directly to everything that I do. So my younger brother Colin died 10 years ago. It's almost 10 years. His 10-year anniversary was in July this year. He died unexpectedly. He was 23 years old, and that happened when I was quite young too. I was only 25 years old. So it's quite a sort of it's not something you expect to go through at that age, for a younger brother to pass away. And ever since then, I've been through a lot of different emotions. It changes year on year for me. It's just I get older, obviously, as well. I'm able to deal with it a little bit differently, but also use it differently as well. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I've never been one to be depressed or sad or sort of like moping around. I'm always kind of on the go. I think a big part of that, when I was 25, 26, I started to take education a lot more seriously. I started to read a lot of books. I started to just want to do more. And I think a big part of that, when Colin died 10 years ago, it was that it didn't sort of destroy me. It fueled me to want to get as much as I possibly can from whatever it is that I'm doing. So I never stop. And there's pros and cons to this. Like, absolutely, someone listening to this just now will probably think, well, that's not a good thing either. And I guess have to deal with these things in the best way I can. So I think Colin passing taught me that life is fragile. It can be taken away, but also that we're not made of glass as well. That we can do a lot. In fact, we can do a lot more than we think we can do. We underestimate what we can achieve. And I just want to get, I think this has driven me to want to do as much as I possibly can and push myself to the boundaries of whatever I'm doing. So learning, development, growing a business, being a dad, having a family, seeing the world. And just I think that was a kick in the gut moment, but it didn't put me on my knees.
Yeah,
it's probably the most important part.
No, I get that, and even if it does put you on your knees, it's just temporary. But we kind of joke about it, really say it jokingly, but none of us are getting out of this alive. So
yeah, that's true. It's the one thing we've all got in common.
Yeah, exactly. So you might as well make the best of it while we're here. And I can feel that loss certainly, because I've had a lot of loss with personal family in my life as well. And, it does take you to your knees for a few minutes, but you just got to get back up and live on in their life, in their memory.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. It's tough to share that from time to time, and I understand that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like talking about him. He doesn't get that chance, so I think if I can have a chance to talk about him, and I think that's important.
It is very important, and that's very cool. Absolutely. So, what was kind of that, what really brought you up out of that, kind of that enough is enough moment that really took you into, well, let's do this. What I really want to do at this point is content marketing, content creation. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because we really don't talk about that a whole lot here on Men of Abundance, the technical side of that. And what is the importance of that, not just from a business aspect, and it mostly is, we're talking more about business, but even from a personal side. How can the guys, what can you share with us about content marketing, content creation that would help our guys out?
Yeah, so if we bridge in from Colin, I think it's a nice bridge actually. So definitely writing, publishing, creating, producing just generally makes you feel better. I think self-esteem and self-confidence is probably the biggest factor in determining someone's success in anything, right? Whether you work for someone else or whether you run your own business or whether we're talking about health or fitness or whatever. I think just being generally positive and having a good attitude, I think, is determined by self-esteem and confidence. I think writing or publishing or creating something, producing something is a big part of that. I think content can lead to a greater life through producing something. So, for example, a daily habit of writing, or you create a podcast. I've got my own podcast as well, which is a kind of good channel. And I think if you strip away the business side of things, I think everyone should see a personal reason for doing all of this, to do it for themselves first. I think it can really aid your own. It can be like your own therapy, or you can be your own therapist essentially by writing or speaking or creating content. So I think from a personal perspective, there is a lot of advantages, a lot of reasons why you should do it strictly for yourself. And then there's all the business advantages as well. So I think, some people write a daily journal, for example, like that's a source of therapy. I mean, it could be down to gratitude, for example, we mentioned at the start of the call. I think a big part of writing a journal comes down to that too. But capturing memories, capturing stories, and some sort of journal or some sort of writing is a great practice to have. It can come down to a daily habit. So from a personal perspective, I think there's a lot to talk about there, and especially when you're talking about a life of abundance. I think all the great successful people did something like that every single day, wrote or captured some sort of daily journal or journal entry of their lives. So yeah, I think from a personal perspective, there's a lot to be said for that. Business side of things, though, I mean, where do you start, right? We could talk for hours on this one. I think if you're not creating content today and you're running a business, then you're missing out on perhaps the biggest opportunity to build an audience. And not only that, by not doing it, you're deteriorating your business, right? Your business is going backwards. Simply by not doing anything, which is the danger, right? So a lot of people think they don't need to do it, or they're not ready to do it, or there's lots and lots of reasons why people don't get started with content. But we have to be honest with ourselves and look at the world around us changing. The way that we buy things, I think you could just look at that basic concept about consumer behavior. How do we buy things today? And I think you could quite easily see that has changed dramatically in the last 20 years since the internet has become, it's in everyone's pockets now. I think if you look at the way that consumer behavior has changed and your business and how your business communicates, and you could quite quickly discover that there's a gap. And most businesses aren't communicating in the way that consumers actually want to communicate with businesses. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just to kind of be honest with yourself and look at how you buy things today, look at how your family buy things today, look how your friends are buying things today, and then look at your business and think, are we doing everything we can to be relevant today?
Very, very good explanation. I was thinking, as you were saying that, I was just listening to a podcast sometime last week, and this hits the nail on the head from a business aspect. And this guy, I'm not going to remember his name, but he was an IT guy, and he worked for a big company. In fact, he worked for Starbucks Corporation. and he was one of their top IT guys, but he loved beer. And he loved beer, I should say. So he started this blog, and he was writing about IT stuff and sharing his knowledge with IT stuff. But, oh, by the way, he talked a lot about beer as well. Here's the cool thing about content marketing and what it does for your business, exactly what Chris was just talking about, is another guy who owned a brewery wanted a website built, but he wanted it built from somebody who understood the industry. So he Googled technical support or website building, because this guy built websites on the side as well, and beer. And this guy's name popped up. Why? Because he was already blogging about website development and all this type of stuff involved with the website development and beer. And he wasn't even marketing it. He was just writing about it. He had no idea. Now the guy has built an app called, I think it's called Age Verify. And almost every alcohol-related website out there uses this software and to verify the age of people who are coming onto the website. And then he's got just more business than he can imagine, because he's building websites specifically for that industry, and that's his niche. And I think that's a brilliant example. You have any other examples similar to that?
Yeah, so I can kind of build on that one, actually. The key there was that the person that was looking for the website, right, he had a problem, right? He needed a solution for it. He didn't know who he was looking for. He didn't know if there was a solution out there. He never knew the name of the company or the name of the person he was looking for, but he found them. That's content marketing, is to close that gap. So you've got to imagine that someone's on Google looking for something and they've never heard of you before. How do they find you? That's the content that you create to attract people, to pull them in, right? So I think that's a really good example, actually, a really good example of it. It's when people aren't looking for you, they don't know who you are, how do they find you? And they're typically typing in questions and problems into Google, not your brand name. So a lot of people will say things like, we're page 1 on Google for our business name. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but nobody knows who you are. They've never heard of you before when they've got a problem. So it's like pointless. So yeah, I think that's a great example. I mean, you could take another example of that. I mean, we've got loads of success stories. One of the best success stories we have is with a manufacturing company. So it's a B2C product, and it's almost like you got to imagine yourself looking out onto your back lawn, and you want to have like an outhouse or a shed. I don't know what they call it in America. We call it a summer house here, almost like a wooden shed, really high-end wooden shed out there. And you'd be sitting out there drinking a glass of Prosecco on a summer's evening with your husband or your wife or your family. And immediately you're sitting there Saturday afternoon or something like that, and you immediately become aware that you want to have this in your backyard. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to go onto Google and you're going to be like, what size do we need? How much is it going to cost? What type of wood do we want? What color? What kind of roofing do we want? Do we need to create some foundations here? We've got enough room. What would it look like? You've got tons of questions. You haven't once thought about where you're going to buy it yet, but you're looking online for answers to all of these questions. It's the company that answers those questions in a trusting way, in an honest way, in an unbiased way, is the one that's going to educate them so they can make an educated buying decision. And if they're the ones that are educating them and they're on their website, there's a very good chance that they're going to be in with a shout when they want to contact a business for the first time. And the reality is that 70% of the buying decision is made online before someone contacts a business for the first time. And as soon as you appreciate and understand that, content marketing isn't just like, oh, we should do that. It's like, if we don't do this, we are leaving money on the table. We're losing out on customers that we never even knew that we had the chance to get. So that's why content marketing is so important.
Yeah, and more importantly to me, a potential customer is going to end up working with somebody that they really can't relate to. If you're the guy that they're looking for, you're the person that they're looking for, and they're never going to find you unless you put yourself out there in such a way. Brilliant. Absolutely love it.
And there's a ton of opportunity. Like, don't think that your industry is different, or that it doesn't apply to your industry, or there's tons of people already doing it in our industry, so we can't do it, blah blah blah. It's just you need to get yourself out there. Stop, park the excuses and just get started.
I'm glad you said that. So what is one of the most unlikely industries that you've ever worked with that they were like, content marketing is just not going to do anything for me, and you kind of turned them around?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I don't know if I've got an answer for that one. Let me think. the best one actually. It's a standard one that comes up a lot is B2B companies. B2B companies typically don't think content marketing works for them, like a sales consultant or something, or a IT company, or like anything B2B. They always say something, yeah, but it doesn't really work. Will this really work for B2B companies? And the reality is that of course it does. It works for B2B and B2C and all different types of companies. So that's a fairly common one that we get all the time. So I'm trying to think of maybe one will pop up as we chat along, but I can't think of a really, really strange one off the top of my head just now. Software's probably one, actually. Someone that sells like really niche software probably wouldn't think that it works for them, but it can do. Content marketing does so much. It isn't just about getting customers. It's about being able to pitch for higher prices, higher contracts, getting better quality of customers as well, having customers stay with you for longer and spend more over a longer period of time. Content marketing really ticks the box across the whole buyer journey. The prospecting part, whilst they're considering or making a decision, through to when they become your customer and you want to keep a customer for life. Content marketing sees that whole journey. So I think if you're just looking at content marketing from the I want to get more customers perspective, you're actually only seeing a small part of the content journey. So I think that's another reason why it works so well for every single industry, is because you can use content at multiple parts of the customer journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're seeing this more and more in our books. And, anytime you pick up a book these days, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, it really doesn't matter. You're going to find throughout the book, specifically when they're how-to type of books, personal development type of books, any sort of technical, any sort of how-to book, they're going to reference various apps. They're going to reference various websites. They're going to reference YouTube videos. So they're pulling it all in from every direction so that all of their content is available to the people that are interested in that particular industry. So, guys, when you're thinking about content, we're not just talking about what we're doing right here with podcast, which to me is one of the most amazing pieces of content that you could create for your business. And you don't have to be a podcaster for that matter. You can be a guest on a podcast because your real voice is getting put out there. And to me, that's just, the best way to get to know somebody is to listen to them speak, hear the fluctuation in their voice and the passion in their voice. But then you put that into written form in a blog, you put it into a book. Even music is content marketing. A lot of music has a message to it, and they're putting their message out there. And earlier, Chris was talking about therapeutic. A lot of writers who write music, write plays, write books, they started out doing it in many cases because it was therapeutic. And it turned into poetry, and it turned into printed material, and it turned into music. So it's everywhere in our lives, in our daily activities.
Yep, absolutely. Content is everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. So, Chris, at this point, we're going to pay it forward to our abundant leaders. You ready to do that, brother?
Let's do it.
So give men of abundance 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today.
The things I live by, I guess, is probably the best way to start is I've got the t-shirt on. You can see it in the video here, right? Do more of what makes you happy.
I love it.
And this is a Johnny Cupcakes brand from Boston. And that's number one tip, is to just always work towards doing something that makes you happy, right? Even if you have to do something that doesn't make you happy right now, always have that in the front of your mind. What are you working towards? Do more of what makes you happy. Surprisingly, another tip, number 2, would be from what we've just talked about as well, is that just, create something, publish something, produce a blog, a podcast, do something, do it for yourself, and create content and get out there, let your voice be heard. And I think for a business type of one, for those that run their own businesses, I think this is one that I think gets lost in the noise a little bit when it comes to business advice and sales advice, is to focus more on the customers that you have now more than the ones that you don't have. And I think it's something that's massively missing with business today, is that there's a lot of people out there prospecting all the time and not looking after the ones they have. And the more you look after them, the more they'll look after you. So that would be my 3 big tips for today.
Excellent. Perfect. I appreciate that. What daily habits make up the biggest impact in your life?
Yes, habits are funny for me. I have some. I don't have any particularly bad ones, but I don't have any hugely particular good ones either. So apart from one of the number one tips I do from a business perspective, so I'll give a business one and a personal one. The business one is always doing something towards growing my business every day, right? An activity every single day that will result to the business growing or going forward. Like this is a great example. Being a guest on a podcast is a good example of an activity that's about growing the business, right? So always something. And then number two is, this is something I do every single day, is I read and I write. Every single day I will read and I will write. And that's just turned into a daily habit over the years. I don't even have it in my schedule anymore, really, to be honest. It's just, I just do it. And it's amazing. It's an amazing habit to have. And if I don't get to read or write in a day, I am really cranky. It's like something that I need to do. So that would be like the habits that kind of like fuel me, really, to be honest, every single day.
So speaking of reading and writing, what are you reading or listening to now that you'd recommend to our abundant leaders, and why?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that, and like tons of stuff just now. But I mean, I think to kind of give it some focus, I am really interested in futurist type stuff just now. So I'm reading I'm just going down that rabbit hole just now. So I've just read Kevin Kelly's The Inevitable Non-Obvious Trends 2017 by Bhargava. And that's kind of just opened up a whole host of stuff. An example is the Wait But Why website. Tim Urban, I just read a couple of hundred pages on his website over the weekend about AI and brain interfaces and stuff like that. So that's kind of like my biggest thing just now, is like getting stuck in about all of that. So Wait But Why is like the one big resource I would say that I'm getting stuck into just now. And Non-Obvious Trends 2017 and Kevin Kelly's The Inevitable have probably been like the top three things in the last couple of weeks that I've been reading and studying.
Very cool. Yeah, those are completely different than what I normally get in the answers, and I appreciate that, because everybody's always about, some sort of how-to book or personal development book, but it's important to read other things and really broaden your thought process. One of the guys that I follow, obviously, or maybe not so obviously to some of you, but some of the listeners know, is Peter Diamandis. He is the author of Abundance and Bold. And he does a lot of work and a lot of research and posts a lot of information about AI.
Yes.
And he works very closely with Elon Musk and other forward thought leaders like that. It's just truly, truly amazing where we're going with that stuff.
Yeah. That's definitely a subject for everyone to at least have like a surface level awareness of, because it's going to change the world for definite. And it's going to, if anything, it's going to change the way that people buy things and consumers consume. So that's like one of the reasons that kind of triggered my thought. I was like, I need to kind of figure out what's going on for my own community, have a better understanding of most people about what's actually happening here, so that I can be at the forefront of it, or at least be able to help people shape. In fact, the personal reason for me going deep into this subject was for my son Spencer, he's just 18 months old, 20 months old now, was that I just wanted to have, when he grows up, he might never drive a car as we drive it. Like that's the reality, that when he turns 17 to drive a car, cars will not be like the car I drive today. That's an actual real possibility, which is crazy, right? And I just want to be in a position where I can not tell him what to do or even advise him, but just be able to shape that for him. So if he's thinking about doing something, or he wants to use me, to have a chat about something, at least I'm like aware of what's actually happening in the world. So I think getting into the subject from a personal perspective was a big driver of mine.
And now that we opened that up, I have to say, guys, seriously, take heed to what Chris just said. You really have to at least get some base knowledge, because some of you are sitting on the edge of your seat. Some emotions just popped up when Chris said it's a good possibility that his son, by the time he's driving in the next 16, 18 years, will not be driving a car like we drive today. That builds up some emotions. Some of you freaking got some fear going on there. You're pissed off about the prospect of that, but you really got to look into the whole thing before you make an emotional decision on how you're going to feel about that. Seriously, it's just like anything else. You're just fear of the unknown. It pisses people off and it makes you act crazy. So definitely, Peter Diamandis is one guy to look after. And who was it that you just mentioned? We're going to have it all listed in the show notes. Like
Kevin Kelly, Tim Urban, Peter's books, definitely Abundance. Those are like the main ones. There's a few more. Non-Obvious Trends 2017 is like a great book. It's like a curated book. It's a book of curated trends. I think it's a great place to it's really easy to read, and it's also really kind of like broad as well. So you don't really have to know anything technical. You just get a good understanding of what's happening in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll have all of that linked up in the show notes so you guys can go check that out. And I highly suggest that you do. So, Chris, what do you feel holds most people back from living a life of true abundance?
Themselves. You probably had the answer to this question before, I guess, but typically us. I think I've got a little list here of things that I think are relevant and things that I see in myself and things that I try to improve on a daily basis as well, like self-doubt and like not feeling good about yourself, like low self-esteem. I love to look at things instead of saying something like, "What's the worst that could happen?" I like to say, "What's the best that could happen?" Right, and that's just like a shift in mindset as well, and especially in business, because a lot of things can go wrong. But if you go into something with the mindset of like, what's the worst that could happen, then you're not looking at the best case scenario. I want the best things to happen, right? I want to try and push myself all the time. So I think like self-doubt leads to like low self-esteem, which leads to a sort of more reserved or maybe negative attitude towards things as well, and there's not really any motivation. Or there's a lack of motivation, and then it leads to an underestimation of what you're really capable of. So it's just like this vicious cycle, and then it goes into procrastination, which like you do nothing, and then when you do have success, you don't appreciate it and all that stuff. So I think it can be like a really dark place you can go into, and I think it all comes back to believing in yourself. Like that's the key. So what holds you back is doubting yourself. And what helps you move forward is believing in yourself. And each one of them takes you down a completely different path. That's the number one thing I think every day is to feel positive about your life and to not doubt what you're capable of. You're capable of way more than you think. And just to believe that, I think, is the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you started to talk a little bit about it there, and that is the self-talk and personal affirmations. You're talking to yourself anyway. You're either telling yourself, I can't do this, or you're telling yourself, no, screw that. That's the old guy. I can do this. I just got to figure out how. You either are in that downward spiraling self-talk of doom, or you can just turn that around like you just said and bring yourself back up and realize that you can do it.
Yeah, of course you can do it. Of course you can. Like, of course, everybody can do anything they want to do within reason, right? There's someone that's done it before you, and you can build on that. Of course, there's every possibility. Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds cliche, but it really is absolutely true. So what does living a life of abundance mean to you, Chris?
Yeah, I've never thought about this before. And I think it comes back to, and I was hoping that our conversation would lead me to an answer for this question as well. And I think that it's being responsible for my actions, I think, like full responsibility for what I do and what I don't do, and whatever that outcome is, like what the result of that is. I think it's about taking like responsibility for all of that stuff. So not relying on other people to take up, my problems or my mistakes or whatever. And on the other side of the coin as well, the success, right? So to accept responsibility for the success that I have too. But I think that abundance, that leads to abundance for me. So it's like almost like it's me. I am responsible for this. Like whatever it is, like the reason I have a problem is because I created it. The reason I have a challenge is because I'm pushing forward. The reason I have success is because I worked hard for it. And that gives me like almost, it's not peace of mind, but that abundance, right? That I am able to have as much control as possible about my environment and what I do. And I'm making a choice to do that thing. And I think that comes back to just taking full responsibility. Yeah,
that's an excellent answer. There's so much freedom in knowing that if I put myself in the situation that I'm in, then only I can get myself out of it by, doing whatever it is that you need to do to just realizing that, number one, because when you're blaming others, then you have to rely on others to help you out of the situation that you're in. They're not there to help you,
Yeah.
So, yeah, great.
That's right. And I think that people help you more if you're willing to help yourself first. I think that's the key. I mean, I had a challenge even today where, like, I had to do all the hard work to get the help I needed, right? So I think people, and I know this from my own self, from, like, my own coaching perspective as well, as I'm much more engaged if someone has helped themselves first when I help them. If that makes sense, right? So there's a bit of a partnership there. I think that's key.
Yeah,
and I think that's abundance to me, and just knowing that, like, just understanding that I have everything I need to do whatever I want. Like, that's the world that we live in, and I think that gives you that sense of abundance that you can be who you want to be.
Excellent. Outstanding. So we're going to close this up, Chris. Before we do, what did we not talk about that you want to ensure our abundant leaders get out of our conversation?
Just, I don't know. I think we covered a lot, right? We covered a lot. Work hard and make sure you get paid for it, right? We never talked about that. Do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely going to have your site. I've got your site up here, and we're going to have it all linked up in the show notes. The contentmarketingacademy.co.uk. We'll have all of that linked up in the show notes, but is there any other way in particular, other than all your social media sites that are here on the site as well, that you would like to share with our abundant leaders for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I think if anyone's got any questions or they want to pick my brain about something that we've covered today, the best place is Twitter at Chris Marr 101, and that's the best place to grab me, and happy to, anybody to connect and reach out. It'd be nice to hear from her.
Outstanding. Yeah. So we're going to have all that linked up in the show notes, Chris, so everybody can find you. And brother, I truly appreciate your time, your information, talking about content marketing. And I think we created some damn good content here today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. It was great fun. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Aloha. All right, guys, what I want you to take out of this conversation, whether you have a business or you're into marketing or whatever the case may be, is to create content one way or another. Create music, create a journal, write down your thoughts, write down the things that you want to do in life. You've heard me talk about, and I don't talk about it as much anymore, but I have talked about the dream board or your vision board, or you don't even have to have a board. I think it's very powerful to have a vision board, but even to have a book or a journal or something you can keep by your bed every single night, and at the very least, write down the things that you love about your wife. Write down the things that you love about your family. Write down the things that you love about your kids. Write down the things that you are grateful for, like I do every single morning. I write down things that I'm grateful for. I write them down. And then I put some of those things into action as well. But something about writing things down, that is creating content. And later in life, that information, at the very least, is going to be absolutely priceless to those you leave behind. If not for anything else, that is a great way to keep track of your life so that others can remember you through that. This right here is truly a lost habit because there are so many people, like I already said, there are so many people from our history that wrote down things that they did, not just scientists, not just people like Benjamin Franklin, but many prominent figures in our past. We know so much about them because they kept a journal. They wrote a biography that was meant to be carried on and passed on throughout generations and future generations within their family. Just put some thought to it, guys. Now go out and live your life of abundance and make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.